All right, I'll get started with just some quick intro slides about today's talk and then a couple other opportunities we've got coming up. So thanks everyone for joining today's Bench2Market talk titled Resources to Accelerate Your Medical Technology Innovation. I'm really excited to talk to a couple other accelerator programs from around the country and give the audience a few other sort of insight into how they can move their technology forward. Before we get into that, I just want to highlight a few other opportunities that are coming down the pike in the next couple of months here. The first one will be our next Bench2Market talk. Having some trouble with my presentation here. Let's try resharing this. Here we go. So our next Bench2Market talk is going to be called Tales from the Trenches. And this will give us the opportunity to learn from some other entrepreneurs at Emory and Georgia Tech who have kind of been through this journey before and can talk about some of the resources that were helpful for them, as well as any obstacles they encountered. We're planning for this one to be an in-person talk, either at Emory or Georgia Tech. So please stay tuned for some details on venue and other registration details. But the idea is that we'll have an opportunity for some networking here. So you can really get to know these entrepreneurs and ask them questions about kind of how they accomplished what they were working on. The next one I want to highlight is the Emory Innovation Forum, kind of a similar event. This one's going to be on October 26th at 5 p.m. So kind of a happy hour time frame at the Hatchery. And this is going to be focused on some Emory innovators that have worked within that ecosystem, and they'll get to kind of share their stories as well. So feel free to sign up for that on the website that I have here, or just take a look on our website as well. We'll be promoting that event too. Another opportunity that you may have seen floating about is Lab to Launch. This is a launch pad at Emory, a wet lab incubator space to support innovation and entrepreneurship. So if you've got a slightly later stage company that you've spun out and are looking for kind of that first couple benches of lab space, then this is, and you're affiliated with Emory University, you're either, have IP that you've licensed from there, or you're an alumni who's building a company. This could be a great opportunity for sort of your first lab space. If you're interested and or have any questions, feel free to contact Biolocity's newest team member, Harry Gerard. I've got his email address at the bottom of this slide, and he'd be happy to tell you more about that. Next, we have a running opportunity for legal office hours with Professor Nicole Morris from Emory School of Law. If you have questions about really any kind of legal matters related to startup incorporation, it could be IP, trademark, non-disclosure agreements, all that kind of stuff, feel free to sign up for a time, and we'd be happy to set up an appointment with Professor Morris. Finally, as many of you know, Biolocity is part of the BARDA Drive Accelerator Network. So through this opportunity, we're able to extend our programming beyond just the Georgia Tech and Emory ecosystem. BARDA will occasionally publish new areas of interest for funding that are up to date on their website and on ours. I have a few listed here as well. So if you're interested in applying for BARDA funding, please feel free to sign up again on Biolocity's website. We'd be happy to connect you with that opportunity. All right, so finally today, like I said, I'm excited to talk to a couple of other accelerator programs for how you can accelerate your medical technology innovation. We've got 3 speakers with us today. The first is Nathan Sundheimer, who leads corporate innovation for health at Plug and Play Tech Center. Rowan Cade, who's the co-founder and program manager for BARDA Ventures. And then Alexei Teague, who's a program manager at UMass N2D2. So to kick things off, I figured we could give each of our panelists time to just sort of give a brief overview about their program and how they work with early stage companies. And I'll hand it over to Nathan, maybe to kick things off on how things work with Plug and Play.
Sounds great, and thank you for the intro, John. Let me pull up my slides real quick. Can everyone see my screen? Fantastic. All right, well, hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Sonheimer, and I head U.S. Healthcare Partnerships at Plug and Play. But prior to this role, I ran our digital health accelerator for our more provider-centric startups. But even though Plug and Play is an accelerator, it's a lot more than that itself. Really, what Plug and Play does in a nutshell is we connect the world's best startups with national and global corporations to bring new tech and solutions to market faster. And we do this through our open innovation platform. And really, that open innovation platform is comprised of 3 specific buckets. The first is corporate innovation, and this is where we actually provide corporate innovation services to corporations all around the world, and really helping them, drive innovation in their own unique ways. What we also do is we run accelerator programs, but the term accelerator is a bit unique in the sense that it doesn't operate like a traditional accelerator, and it's really built on behalf of the corporate partners. So throughout the year in the corporate innovation, when we're introducing startups over and over again to our corporate partners, they may come across a few where they say, hey, we love these startups, but they're not just exactly quite where we need them to be in order for us to engage successfully. And so what they do is they put them into our accelerator program. And what we do is we co-create a curriculum with the startup and the corporate to ultimately get them to that next inflection point and really use that as a launch pad for further engagement, whether that's continued engagement or a partnership, investment, whatever that may be. And then lastly, we are investors ourselves. So we do meet startups across all different domains, and we are looking at them with an investment lens as well. Really how our accelerator program works is that we really begin with startup sourcing. So we work with our ventures team and our partners to really define which areas of interest are most important for our corporate partners. And what we do is we source startups that ultimately fit those parameters. What we ultimately do is from that initial list is we select a smaller number to participate in a selection day, which is an opportunity for them to present in front of our corporate partners. Ultimately, the partners select the startups that they wish to participate in the program, and then we put them into our accelerator, which consists of webinars, workshops, mentor sessions, intros to VCs, so on and so forth. And then throughout that process, they have the opportunity to engage with our partner, but we also try to engage them with other partners as well. And ultimately, this culminates in an expo at the end of the program, which we really see as a launch pad for further engagement, really just talking about the successes and the traction that they've built over that 3-month period, and then really looking forward to the future. Generally speaking, the way that our selection process really works is we source about 500 startups, depending on those criteria. We shortlist the startups. A few of them present at the selection day. We have about 15 to 20 startups that participate in our program. And then typically from those programs, about 3 of those startups go on to do pilots, but others have other engagements in terms of investments and white labeling their products, so on and so forth. This slide really just illustrates what a week in the Plug and Play Accelerator looks like. And as you can see, it's jam-packed with different content, in terms of mentor sessions, workshops. We have multiple networking hours, webinars, so on and so forth. But we really try to sprinkle in a lot of different elements so that there's as much content as there possibly can be as you are, and resources as you are working toward the growth of your company. And then lastly, these are the corporates that we work with. Traditionally, they're hospital systems, pharmaceuticals, and industry government. Those are the 3 main buckets. And the startups that we typically work with are a little bit more digital health oriented. So we don't do as much in the therapeutic or in the life science space, like no small molecules or anything like that. And we don't really do anything with pure devices either. But as long as there's a software component, we can introduce you to any of these corporations. And that's my spiel. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nathan. Really nice to see a program with such broad-reaching programs, not only in healthcare, but in other startups as well. Super interesting. Rowan, how about you tell us a little more about BARDA next?
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rowan Cade. I'm the program manager for BARDA Ventures. I work for the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. Our mission is to develop medical products to protect Americans from health security threats, which include emerging infectious diseases like COVID-19, pandemic influenza, as well as chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. My role within BARDA is to manage a partnership with Global Health Investment Corporation that makes venture capital investments in BARDA's mission spaces. Our partnership is a bit of a unique structure in that it's a partnership between the federal government and a nonprofit organization. But in reality, we like to try to operate just like any traditional VC with one additional but vital level of evaluation, and that's what impact can this company or technology have in our fight against the next health security threat? From the BARDA side, we bring a wealth of scientific expertise from the entire BARDA staff. BARDA as an agency has helped get 65 products through FDA licensure, approval, or clearance, and just the 17 years of BARDA's existence. We have deep expertise in virology, infectious disease, immunology, manufacturing, animal study, human clinical trial design, a lot of different experience that can help, that we bring to both the partnerships we have on the non-dilutive side and our portfolio companies that we make equity investments, or that GHIC makes equity investments into. This is just one tool that BARDA has, and as John mentioned, we also support Biologically, we also support Nathan and Plug and Play, and Alexei and M2D2 on the Accelerator side. But the BARDA Ventures GHIC partnership really provides us a tool to help support companies and fill in gaps in our pipeline or accelerate those really high priority areas. We were actively communicating with BARDA divisions and leadership to understand where their gaps are, what's a top priority, and we really rely on these technical experts to help evaluate potential investments for us. Our investment strategy is really driven by those needs and those priorities. We're looking to invest in high impact companies within BARDA's mission space that also have a strong potential for long-term commercial sustainability and financial success. We have currently in our portfolio a seed, Series A, and Series B company. We're stage agnostic overall, and I can focus later on about how we engage with really early stage, early spin outs and seed investments as we take questions there. But stage agnostic overall. So that's kind of the highlight of mine. I'll pass back to you, John.
Thanks, Rowan. Yeah, it's really great to hear more about BARDA Ventures. And as you mentioned, it's nice to kind of really benefit from the network effects of the whole BARDA Drive Accelerator network. As you heard, all of our panelists today are in one way or another connected to that. And what's really nice is that if you come to us and maybe we think you might be a better fit for one of these other programs, we can always kind of utilize our connections with the network to make that introduction. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our last panelist here, Alexei, to tell us more about how M2D2 does things.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, John. Let me just bring up my slideshow here. All right. So as John said, my name is Alexei Teague. I am one of the program managers here at UMass M2D2, as well as running the on-site operations in one of our Lowell locations. So first of all, M2D2 stands for the Massachusetts Medical Device Development Center. We're a joint initiative between UMass Medical School and UMass Lowell. And our mission is really to take technologies coming from both UMass Lowell and UMass Medical, as well as just small startup companies, and really getting them from proof of concept all the way to commercialization. So what is M2D2 actually? What are we physically? We are 3 facilities, 2 in Lowell, 1 in Worcester at the UMass Medical School. What we provide are a lot of administrative support, mentoring, office hours, lab operations, assisting with federal grant programs, and most importantly, our core research facilities, which are enormous resources for smaller companies. What we specifically provide at all of our locations, we have first and foremost space, whether that's office space or wet lab space, BSL 1 or 2. We provide equipment, as I mentioned, with our core research facilities, as well as a lot of on-site equipment in our own labs. We also provide a lot of funding opportunities, such as introductions to investors, strategic partners, which we can do one-on-one or through our pitch events. Most recently, we had, I'll go over a little later, our Barracuda Bowl pitch event, which took a lot of health security related companies and got them in front of many investors, including the BARDA team. Outside those, we also provide our mentoring and office hours, which are all free programs to access, actually, with many different expertises in regulatory, legal, technical, business, grant writing, really whatever you'll need to get to commercialization. We have 46 resident startups currently on site, as well as 62 that are in our various programming. We have 22 graduates to date, as well as many student opportunities, which is really important since we are first and foremost part of the University of Massachusetts, whether that's through internships or full and part-time positions. This is just a quick overview of our team, leadership from both UMass Lowell and UMass Medical. I'll give some of their contact information later in case you'd like to reach out to anyone. This is just a slide to really go over. This is the perfect place to start and really get your feet wet if you are, especially a professor, thinking of spinning your technology out. You don't necessarily have to get physical space with us. We offer things such as virtual residency, which is really just a way to get to know the M2D2 team and really get just the starting mentorship on how to spin out your technology, which I know is something we're going to go over today in the discussion, so I won't get too much into it now. As Rowan mentioned, we're also part of the BARDA Drive Accelerator Network. I'm actually the program manager here for M2D2, and what we do there is really socialize areas of interest and help funnel companies down their funding pipelines and source companies related to health security topics. We are also involved with the CAPCAT program, which is the Center for Advancing Point of Care Technologies in the heart, blood, lung, and sleep disorder space, which is another mechanism through the NIH where we funnel companies to them to help them get government funding. Another way to get involved with M2D2 is the biggest challenge we have is our 200K challenge, one of our pitch competitions I was mentioning earlier, which is when we bring in all of our corporate sponsors and get about 15 finalists in front of them to pitch in front of not only our sponsors, but a whole host of different investors from the Boston ecosystem. All the companies are chosen by our sponsors as well. We don't actually have much say in who we choose to be a finalist to pitch. So if you're chosen for this competition, it's very likely that you will stay in close contact with the sponsoring company and possibly get further funding or an acquisition. These are just some of those sponsors that I was mentioning before. It's worth noting we are a J&J Innovation J Labs location, and Massachusetts Life Science Center is our founding sponsor. Another way all these sponsors get involved with us is through, we do have a virtual accelerator program as well. It's 12 weeks of education and mentorship that ends in a final showcase in-person pitch day in front of many experts, funders, and strategic partners. Similar to our 200K challenge, this is also run by our sponsors who choose what companies will be pitching and participating in the program. So there's a good chance for engagement and more follow-on funding as well as acquisition. That's just a short overview of what M2D2 is. If any of you have questions or would like to know more about any of our programs, feel free to reach out to myself. My email's at the bottom there, or either of my colleagues, and any of us can help you out with any of our programs. And that's it for me on M2D2.
Thanks, Alexei. So as you can see, lots of opportunities around the country to get engaged and find some resources to help move your technology forward. And I think it's a perfect lead into, I guess, a way to start this discussion, which is about timing. So I guess put yourself in the shoes of, maybe an academic innovator or someone at a really early stage. You've got a great idea, a good technology, think there's an unmet need there. When's the right time to spin that out and to engage an accelerator program like yours? And maybe I'll pick on Alexei first, since I know you work with a lot of academic stage companies. What do you think about kind of timing?
Timing's hard. There really isn't a perfect time to do it, but so if you're a academic researcher here at UMass Lowell, for example, it's when you're creating some sort of technology that you know is going to make an impact out there in the world, and you want to get it out there, you don't know when, you don't want to just immediately jump into our accelerator commercialization. You want to get your device together, some proof of concept together. It is a lot more comfortable and easier to be in academia than in our labs. But a lot of these academics, I find, reach a certain point where there isn't too much more to do in the labs in academia. I mean, there's always obviously going to be that next experiment I need to do, that one final thing, I need to prove this. But there gets to be a point where you start to have more free time and you get a little too comfortable with academia. And that's the point where you really need to start thinking about where you can take your technology next and finally leaving the campus, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, it's quite a different animal to be working on academic research versus trying to make a focused pitch for advancing a particular product. So I think kind of figuring out where to draw that line is a good challenge. Nathan and Rowan, any other thoughts on that about kind of when to engage like this?
Yeah, I would echo the same sentiments as Alexei. I mean, truly what we've seen is, companies have little success or little chance of success unless someone who's actually been working on the original research is willing to actually leave academia to actually start the company. It's really tough / impossible to do both concurrently. But as Alexei mentioned, there's an inflection point in which that transition needs to happen. That's different with every solution and every single startup. In the early stages of developing that new technology, take advantage of those university resources and the just that not the same level of pressure. But at some point in time, though, that has to flip. And being at the university isn't really going to do much good for advancing your solution or your technology. And so therefore, that's really whenever you hit that inflection point is really when you need to spin it out. That'll be different for everybody.
Fair. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think in terms of two questions here. One is, when's the right time to engage and talk with either my team or these other accelerators? I think it's never too early to start the conversation. I think there's some baseline of being able to communicate your ambition or your vision is need to have a productive conversation from the beginning. So you can't come to us without any type of vision or objectives. But then when you actually go to spin out the company, I think there's multiple steps, and I'm sure Biomedical and Emory and Georgia Tech can work with you on the actual tech transfer process and when you incorporate a company versus when you leave your job in academia and becoming a company employee. Those are all kind of various different stages. I would say from an investment standpoint, we're not going to invest in a company that doesn't have a dedicated, full-time team, at least someone involved in the early scientific founding and someone that has experience from business perspective of running a startup or being involved with a startup. And those don't necessarily have to be two different people, but typically it ends up being that way. And I think in terms of give a bit more concrete information on timing and when is, I would encourage most academics to try to get as much proof of concept data in their academic labs and with their RO1 grants or other translational research grants in the safety of the academic labs with all the additional resources, and then out-license that to a startup company when you're ready to make that jump. And just because it's if you move too early, there's not much to fund. There's not much there. And then it becomes hard to kind of backtrack into, oh, well, now I'm going back into academia to continue this research.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And I think there definitely is a risk to trying to make this push too early. Like you say, maybe you haven't got the key proof of concept data together. You don't have your pitch really focused. And the other piece I think with timeline is that once you've taken that step to incorporate, spin this out, maybe license your IP, it kind of starts a clock with potential investors, right? I'm trying to sort of step into your eyes as a, or step into your shoes, Rowan, as an investor. You don't want to be talking to potential investors and have a really long, road behind you and say, okay, I've been operating this company for 5-6 years. We haven't really been able to hit these value inflection points. You want to demonstrate to people that once the money is in the company or the programming, funding, whatever it is, you'll be able to execute quickly and reach that return. So I think it's worth putting some thought into that. And something I wanted to dig in a little deeper into that I heard a few of you mention is sort of who's on your team. These companies often start with a technology person, maybe that's a professor or a postdoc or a scientist somewhere that just got a good idea. But obviously, as you've heard here, there's a lot of other components to the team that will make for a successful company beyond just the scientific expertise. So at this early stage where you might be engaging in an accelerator or an early stage funding program, talking to BARDA Ventures for an investment, who should be on the team? And do you have any advice for how to recruit some of the more business expertise or other kind of areas where the scientific innovator might have a bit of a blind spot?
Go ahead, Joe, and take that one. I think, in terms of recruiting and filling out your team to support, say that the PI or one of the postdocs is leading the charge in the spin out, has the core technical knowledge, but doesn't have the experience of running a startup or working in a startup before. So I think that's probably the most common case. You really want to go find an experienced person in your industry, specific to your industry. So not just any like med tech startup or biotech startup. You want to make sure that they have experience in, if you're doing a small molecule product, with doing drug development with small molecules, doing biologics with biologics. If you're doing a med device or digital health, someone with relevant experience in that domain is probably number one on your list to try to identify. In terms of finding those people, it's a mixture of, probably looking internally to, your home university network and seeing who, is out there that has had experience in this and talking to them. And they could be currently serving in a role and not available, but they might know someone that is. And it's really just a lot of networking and trying to convince someone else that this is, and part of the other reason why you need two founders or want more than one founder is you need to be able to convince someone else that this is a worthwhile cause to quit their job and start the company with you as well. That's a good sign that, like, okay, two people believe in this. It's not just one person's crazy idea. And then there's in terms of the experience that they bring, it adds to the whole team and the likelihood of success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Nathan and Alexei, do you do any of this work with the companies in your programs to try to make some of these introductions, find some other team members, or do you expect that people kind of come with sort of a fully fleshed out team?
Yeah, traditionally in our experience, more often than not, startups come to us with a full-fledged team, but that doesn't mean that they're not looking to expand or they're trying to add different competencies. As Rowan said, accessing your university network or your personal network or having a friend that could access their own network is typically the best way to find a way to fill those gaps. It's really tough to find those individuals on your own, and there's websites and boards out there like AngelList, and yes, there are great companies there, and yes, there are great people that utilize those sites, but there's a lot of extra diligence that you have to do to actually vet those people, and you're better off just finding someone in your own network to find people to fill those voids.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it's also worth emphasizing that your team may change over time, right? The early stage CEO type figure might not be the person who's going to take this all the way to market, and that's okay, right? So trying to find this expertise with the knowledge that you might have some flexibility as your company grows, that's okay. But I think it's almost a bit of sort of humility and then recognizing what you don't know, and then trying to find those folks that can kind of fill that. that piece out. But definitely a big question for early stage companies is really how to build an effective and convincing team. So while we were chatting, a question came in. This is from Dr. Abe Fikadu in Ethiopia. So we've got a pretty far-ranging audience today. And he's wondering about how your programs may work on a global level. So he says, what does your global reach look like? There's opportunities to build startups in countries that maybe historically haven't had as much medical innovation, such as Ethiopia. So I guess, yeah, kind of an open-ended question, but do any of your programs work with companies or opportunities beyond the US? And how does that look like?
Yeah, so to speak from M2D2's point of view, all of our programs are international, whether that's our accelerator or the virtual residency I mentioned, where you're just trying to get your toes wet and sort of just start dabbling and starting your own company. All of our programs are international, as well as our challenge competitions.
Very cool.
Yeah, and from the plug and play perspective, we source startups and technologies at a global scale. We work in 20 different industries, but in healthcare specifically, we operate in 8 locations around the world. We're in Silicon Valley, Alberta, Canada, Cleveland, Munich, Shanghai, Kyoto, Singapore, and Abu Dhabi. And we all have operations in those locations. However, the startups that are part of the program, they're stage and location agnostic. The very first program that I ran, I had a pre-seed company from Vancouver, a Series D company from Tel Aviv, and they covered stages and geographies all in between. And from the investment side, I know we've invested in 2 startups that are based in Africa. And so we are looking to source startups there. And we actually have 3 locations in Africa now. We have 1 in Cairo, 1 in Marrakesh, and 1 in Johannesburg. So we're quickly expanding in that region.
That's fantastic. Really cool to hear about that. Medical innovation knows no borders.
I would add from BARDA Ventures perspective and BARDA's overall perspective, we are able to partner and find and invest in companies and organizations from anywhere globally. There is a very strong preference that company will eventually, establish operations within the United States. And more importantly, that whatever they're working on is applicable to the United States market or U.S. public. Again, our focus, while we acknowledge that global health security and global response to public health emergencies is needed, we do have a strong focus on the U.S. needs in particular.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And then maybe kind of dovetailing off that question. So I'd love to talk a bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion and how that kind of fits into these programs. Oftentimes we hear about that as sort of a separate topic that needs to be covered, but I feel like it's really something that kind of works into each stage of this. So I'd love to hear your perspectives from each of you on sort of when is the right time to start trying to build a diversity into your program. With the knowledge that, we know that diversity can drive innovation, different perspectives really help build a more productive team. When should innovators start considering that in their startups, I guess?
Just generally speaking, right off the bat, that should be a core value and a core principle as you are developing your solution in your startup. Obviously, you have your core scientific team, and whoever's part of that lab that's creating that solution, that's obviously going to be the folks that you lean on the most. But as you expand, and as you've mentioned, John, diversity does drive innovation. So leveraging unique skill sets, leveraging different thoughts, leveraging different experiences is extremely valuable. And, outside of just your core team, when you're looking to expand and grow and really try to understand how this actually fits in the market, DE&I actually can solidify your customer base in a sense, because customers who see themselves and their concerns reflected in the products or the solution that you've created, typically there's already some early data that says hey, they're going to be more loyal to your business and your brand in the long run. But obviously that's much later on down the line. But as I mentioned, as an initial principle, it should be accounted for right away.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks.
Yeah, I would definitely echo what Nathan just said there. If you really want to have a successful business, and that includes having many perspectives outside your own. You're going to have to do it eventually, and it's much easier if you just start thinking about diversity day one, instead of having to backpedal and possibly undo some things later on in the business. Technology perspectives you would wish you'd thought of before. Now you're just having to work them in, having to redo some stuff. So definitely from day one.
One thing I would add to that too is also in your product design and you know, whether it be once you get to clinical trials or making sure that you're bringing in a diverse cohort of trial participants and designing for equitable access and multiple you know, socioeconomic scenarios of accessing your product. And I know that in healthcare that's really difficult because you're thinking of the provider and the payer, and then now the actual patient, and then, oh, how are they going to get to the hospital? Are they going to be able to access this? Or and then when you get to the trial design, how are you going to break outside of those, those top 30 research universities that account for 95% of all clinical trials? And so something to think beyond just your core team, but also how you design your product and engage with customers for patients or the clinical trials.
Yeah, all right, fantastic perspective. I totally echo all of those points. So we've talked quite a bit about sort of what the beginning of this process looks like, what you want to get in order before you approach programs like this, your funders like Rowan. So I want to talk maybe a bit, now let's say we're a company that's participating in your program. What are some of the growing pains that these people experience? Obviously, they're trying to build their team, move their technology development forward, get that next bucket of funding. What are some issues that pop up, and how do you kind of deal with companies that are working on that? Maybe we'll start with Nathan.
Yeah, I would say that depending on your company and your solution, growing pains come in a lot of different shapes and forms. But I would say, the biggest growing pain of someone going through a program is really just finding the time for the program on top of actually running your own business. And so, both are extremely time-consuming endeavors. And so what we actually do, and this is actually a very good exercise for founders and these small teams early on, is to include other team members in this accelerator program process, so it really spreads the load. And so as a founder or a CEO, you quickly learn how to delegate and let other people take control of different elements. Obviously, your expertise may be in the scientific realm, but it doesn't make sense for you to join a workshop on marketing if you don't do any sort of marketing on a day-to-day basis. So it's really just an opportunity to delegate and admit the fact that you can't do everything on your own.
Fair enough. Only so many hours in the day. Alexei, how about you? Anything to add to that? What do you see at M2D2?
Yeah, very similar to what Nathan said. It's really the time commitment. And one of the ways that this really comes in, especially in academia, is a lot of these people, they worked hard for their academic careers and they really like working at the university, but something we have to break to them eventually is, if you really want this company to be successful, you're probably going to have to leave your position at the university and make the company your full-time position, or else there really just isn't enough time in the day to get it all done and focus solely on your company. And it sort of gets to earlier when we were talking about building a team, if you want a great CEO for your company, what we find is you want someone that was there for when their product or technology was first conceived, when they first came up with it, part of the original team. But to be the most successful CEO possible, they need to quit their position in academia. It's an unfortunate growing pain, but really essential for a prosperous company.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, Rowan, I know you mentioned you're stage agnostic, so you may engage with maybe some later stage groups as well. Do you kind of see these same tensions, or are there other problems that may arise as a company continues to grow up, I guess?
Well, so I think first at the seed stage, I think the biggest growing pain is that you're no longer your own master in terms of running the company. You have now taken on institutional, and I mean, seed stage is a little softer. So definitely at the Series A stage, which is probably the first sizable check, and you know, big, you know, serious institutional investors. You are no longer the own master of your company. Not that we're here to, you know, take the company away from you or steal technology anyway, but we're here to help make the company successful. But we're also, you know, holding you to development deadlines and hitting the next inflection point so that we can continue to help grow the company, continue to invest and make this thing successful. And so it's, you know, there is additional pressures on the founders and the company as a whole that they're now beholden to outside investors. And again, we're here to make everyone successful, help and support them through that and make them successful. But it, you know, it kind of changes the tone in terms of, you know, you'll have board meetings, you'll have people to report to other than yourself. In terms of later stage growing pains, I think it's very industry dependent on whether you're a diagnostic or a pharma product or digital health, but usually it's something around making sure that you've got in the right regulatory engagement, since it's a highly regulated industry. No matter what type of product you're developing, getting early regulatory engagement with the FDA and making sure they're on board, having pre-submission meetings before you start your pivotal trials, to make sure that, you know, the study design that you are proposing is actually going to be okay with the FDA and end up in a clearance. Those are, I wouldn't say the growing pains, but they're just the regulatory burden and the complexity of things just continue to grow as you get later stage, and then even post approval, you know, commercialization. Then you're onboarding new professionals. Really, you're now onboarding a sales force, or you're working with partners that will help, you know, market and sell the product with you. And so it's just constant, like, adding new capabilities or skills to your team that you haven't had to tackle before. So there's always just more growth within the leadership team that's needed.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you bring up something that I think is interesting. This concept of having, you know, multiple investors. You're not kind of the master of your own destiny anymore. And, you know, maybe you've got BARDA Ventures, you've got another VC firm, maybe some angels that are still on your cap table. Do you have any advice for entrepreneurs? And this is sort of pointed towards Rowan, of how to manage your board of directors, your group of investors. You're kind of managing up at that point, but how do you balance all those different inputs and motivations, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one thing, you want to make sure you know who you're bringing onto your cap table, and make sure you've gotten comfortable with them throughout the due diligence process, because it is like a marriage. You know, even if you're wildly successful, you'll probably be tied to that investor for the next 5 to 7 years before the company goes public or is bought out. And even then, sometimes they hang around. And so really, you know, making sure that you're comfortable with having the person that's on your cap table or on your board advising the company. And I would say for that, you know, look for smart investors. Look for people that have been investing in the healthcare space for a long time and have success in that space, and can bring value to the investment other than just dollars. And I think, you know, from a BARDA Ventures perspective and the BARDA Ventures GHIC partnership, we kind of, you're lucky in that you get kind of 2 for 1, in the sense that you have GHIC's team, who is full of experienced investors on the venture capital side, as well as experienced team on the global health side, and then BARDA and our team, which will really have some of the world's leading scientific experts working for us that we can bring in to bear and help a company as well, and specific domain expertise within our mission is to try to carve out additional success within our mission. So that really looking for value add investors is a key part of that, and making sure that, you know, you're comfortable when you're going to sign that term sheet.
It's great advice. And I know it's tricky to balance that because when you're starting out, you want to say, all right, anyone who can give me money, I'll talk to you, right? But it's wise to at least do a little diligence on your investors as well and see who you're bringing aboard. That's great advice. All right, well, I've got just a couple more questions left, but to the audience, please feel free to submit any other Q&A questions using the Q&A button down here. But I guess pivoting a bit to the whole panel, we've talked a bit now about how to engage your programs, what you look for in companies, and then what companies might experience as they're participating in your program. I want to talk about kind of on the back end, what does success look like in your programs? For a company that's maybe leaving, do you look for a particular milestone, value inflection point? Yeah, what does a winning team kind of look like coming from your program? Maybe I'll start with Alexei for this one.
Yeah, so there's a couple major things we really consider to be the major milestones of graduating. First would definitely be a lot of follow-on investment achieved. And the second and biggest one would be just moving out of our facility and really getting ready to build their own facility or rent another place somewhere, some amount of space we can't offer, so that basically having their own facility. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. How about you, Nathan?
I would say every scenario is different. So traditionally, because the startups that we work with in our program are a little bit later or a little bit more, you know, in that late seed, early Series A type of space, it really just depends on the corporate and the startup that they're working with. So sometimes, you know, that end goal is an investment. Sometimes it's a pilot or a POC. Sometimes it's even been an acquisition, or it's just the continuance of an engaging relationship. So really, when we look at the success on the back end of a program, it's really, one, did the startup and the corporate accomplish what they wanted to accomplish together? And then two, you know, what are some secondary things that benefited the startup that, you know, were just part of the program, whether that was an introduction to a VC and that VC invests in them 3 months down the road. Like to us, that's a major win.
Great.
Yeah, so obviously we're not really a program, so we don't have like a graduation date. You know, aside from the obvious, you know, 5x return on every investment that we expect to get, you know, our program specifically is just as equally, if not more, focused on driving impact within the health security space and improving global health security, and that can be measured in, you know, getting a product to market that has the capability of saving lives or improving lives, to improving the readiness or reducing logistical or operational burdens that are part of a public health response, or adding, you know, providing equitable access to those products that and you know, speeding, you know, distribution or access to medical countermeasures, vaccines, therapeutics that are needed in a public health emergency. And you know, we're really looking for, you know, outside, you know, in large advancements on the impact side, and just as well as the financial return.
Great. Thanks for that. And I guess for the audience, notice that, you know, there's slightly different answers here for what success looks like. And I think this harkens back to Rowan's point. When you are going to apply for one of these programs or contact an investor for potential funding, it really behooves you to do your research on who those people are, because there's different motivations. There may be a philanthropic bent. They might really care about particular products reaching market. They might be looking for strictly a financial return. So do some diligence on what their metrics are and what makes you a good fit for each of those programs, rather than, you know, just kind of blindly blasting applications out. All right, well, so we're winding down now. I don't see any other questions from the audience at this point. So I guess as some closing thoughts, I'll give all of our panelists just an opportunity to get up on the soapbox for a minute and just give any parting advice to early stage entrepreneurs. What are some key pieces of advice that you want to leave them with? Maybe we'll start with Alexei again.
Yeah, I guess if I had any key advice, it would be to really reach out and try to get as much help as you can. You'd be surprised how much people are willing to help you. For example, a lot of our programs are free. And a lot of people just don't know that until they actually reach out. There's a lot of resources out there that you really have to go out and find, and you have to ask for it. It's not going to be handed to you.
Great advice. And I totally agree with you. I think more often than not, if you ask for advice or help for people, a lot of people are really willing to give it, especially people who've been successful in this arena before. So don't be shy. Nathan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, outside of asking for help and, building and leveraging your network, the other part of that is also being very comfortable with hearing no. And that can come from an investment side or some other side with your solution technology. So, not everyone's going to love it. And you may hear 99 no's before you hear your first yes, but all it takes is one yes. And then also just in general, just take advantage of every opportunity. So whether that's via an accelerator, via another program, maybe it's just a regional networking hour in the local city, connect, listen, and learn from those in the industry and those that have been there before. You'll learn more in those short sessions than you will ever reading any sort of blog or article online.
Totally agree. And I know people probably hear this advice a lot, but I couldn't agree more, Nathan, that you'll have to be comfortable with hearing no, and to be able to separate that feedback and not take it too personally, because everyone's going to have their own reasons for saying no. It could have just been, they were burned in the past by a similar investment, or they know someone who didn't think it was a good idea. So you'll have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. Rowan, how about you? Any parting pieces of advice?
Yeah, I think echoing, ditto to what Nathan and Alexei has said. I would also add that, really reflect internally on yourself and make sure that you're excited about this journey, that, you're ready to wake up every day and work from 9 to 9 on this project and move it forward, because it's, especially in the medical technology industry, it's going to be 5 to 7 years till you get to be quote unquote successful. And so it's, well worth it. I think for a lot of folks, you have to be excited about it, and that excitement will transfer to everyone else that's working, that you're trying to convince to work with you, whether it be investors or advisors, or your new CEO or CFO or whatever. That is infectious, and so make sure that you have that passion, and then you're open about sharing that passion with everyone that you engage with.
Great advice. Thank you. All right. Well, I think that just about does it for our discussion today. I want to again thank all of our phenomenal panelists for some really insightful comments here, and thank our audience for attending. If you've got interesting innovations, please take this advice to heart. Feel free to reach out to Biolocity or any of these wonderful programs to support your early stage medical technology. And keep an eye out for next month's talk. So like I said, we're planning for this one to be in person. You can get a chance to meet some entrepreneurs who've been through this ringer before and are still living it. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next month.